Climate change is a major risk facing cities, nations, and the economy. We have to fight it, and I'm all in.
Miami is all in because sea level rise is real.
HP Inc. is all in.
New Belgium is all in because it's the last call for climate action.
We are all in on turning back climate change.
Walmart is all in.
Mars is all in.
We're all in.
All in.
All in.
All in.
America is all in.
I'm all in because it's time to hit climate change out of the park.
Well, hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us. We have an impressive lineup of speakers today, and that starts with the person I'll turn it over to shortly. She has been a leader in the fight against climate change for many years and a strong partner for Bloomberg Philanthropies. The White House National Climate Advisor, Gina McCarthy, who has the distinction of being born in the same hospital that I was, although I was a little bit ahead of her. Last week, I was glad to take part in the White House Global Climate Summit. It was attended by leaders from around the world, and Gina and the whole team deserve a lot of credit for putting it together. She and I spoke at a Bloomberg event before the summit, and we talked about the importance of focusing on the here and now rather than setting far-off goals for decades into the future. So it was encouraging to see President Biden announce a new target for the United States, cutting emissions by 50 to 52% by the year 2030 compared to 2005. It's an ambitious goal that requires immediate measurable action. It will keep our feet to the fire, and it sends a strong signal to the rest of the world about U.S. climate leadership. But as I said at the summit last week, we have a lot of work to do, and it's going to take all of us, all in, to reach that goal. The White House climate plan acknowledges there's only so much the federal government can do on its own. It recognizes the key role that cities, states, and businesses play. America is all in brings those groups together, along with tribal nations, universities, faith and cultural organizations, and many others. It's the largest national coalition ever created to fight climate change. The federal government can create policies, and it can allocate funding. Both of those things are important. But cities, states, and businesses are the key for turning federal plans into action. Governors, mayors, and local leaders are ultimately in charge of spending funds, managing projects, and executing on the details. Public-private partnerships can make progress happen even faster and more effectively. At the same time, the more the federal government does to support and incentivize all of these groups, the more they can accelerate all the progress they've been making on their own. So all of us really have to work together as partners. To do that, we need to give everyone a seat at the table, to talk to each other and share ideas and come up with new ways to collaborate. That's what today's event is all about. And I hope there will be many more opportunities for conversations like the ones we'll hear today. Our foundation and this coalition will continue to do our part. But the federal government should also find official ways for cities, states, and businesses to report directly on the progress they're making and what resources they need to do more. We have every incentive to act. All the steps we take to cut emissions also help create jobs and grow the economy and fight inequality and improve public health. So there's really no excuse for inaction and nothing we can't accomplish if we work together. I know our next speaker agrees, so let me thank you all for joining us and turn it over to Gina. Gina, the Zoom is yours.
Well, first of all, Michael, thank you for the introduction. I think you gave away the fact that you're not really born in New York City when you said climate advisor. I felt like I was right back at home. So it's terrific to be here. And really, Michael, thank you for all of your tremendous leadership, and not just in America's All In, but but honestly, the way in which you speak to the business community as well and engage them is in the way that you've worked at the UN. You've really been a terrific force and a long-standing one. So I want to thank you for that. As you can imagine, last week was a busy week for me. So I tried to take the weekend off, but Secretary Kerry called me twice anyways, just to chit-chat about what's next, which I'm really excited about because the hard work is really just beginning, and we're even just short of the 100-day mark in this administration. But I'm excited about where we are now, the terrific cabinet that we have. And I think all the work that we did during the early days has really paid off in terms of delivering on the President's Summit and the announcement that we made last week. And I'm honestly so excited about the nationally determined contribution that the President announced. It was work that we have been working on for a long time. And I think it really sends a clear signal that we are all in on this, that every single one of us is committed, and we've made a strong commitment to the international community. And it also means a signal to us that we're off and running to try to work as hard as we possibly can to turn this commitment into a reality. Before I jump into any of the details, I really think it's important for me personally, and I think for all of you, to recognize that this was not a product of just the federal government, that it was actually driven by what's been done at every level of government. If it weren't for cities and towns and for our states and our leaders at all level of government, we would not be able to make a commitment like this. Because we know it was you who held our country together, who held our climate efforts together, who told the world that we weren't out over the past 4 years. While we may not have been in control of all of the efforts of government, we brought every one of us together and we hung tight during those difficult years to make it clear that the United States understood that climate change was happening and that we all had to act. And it was because of all your leadership, everyone on this call built the foundation that allowed us to really put a strong NDC on the table. So now, more than 5 years after the signing of the Paris Agreement, we officially are back in, and we are officially committed to moving forward. And I think it's going to be very challenging. We didn't decide to make it easy for everybody. After all, this next 10 years is make or break for our climate. And we are looking forward to working with all of you to accelerate the pace of the change that we have all started. So as I look forward, I want you to understand that an NDC of 50 to 52% below 2005 by 2030 is doable, but is only going to be achieved if we keep working together. It's only going to be achieved if we maintain our partnership and indeed strengthen it, because the target builds on the leadership that we have provided at all levels of government. We didn't leave you out of the accounting in the beginning. We're not going to leave you out of the celebration when we achieve this in 2030. And so I'm excited about the work ahead, but listen, the way in which we looked at this NDC was to actually do this in a very credible way. So look at the paperwork. We went sector by sector to look at what the opportunities were ahead. And we're talking about the electricity sector, transportation, buildings, industry. We looked at lands and oceans. We looked at the wealth of what we already have in terms of cost-effective, clean technologies and programs and products that were ready for broad deployment and how we could make that happen. We looked at trends in innovation and what the future might bring for us, so we wouldn't discredit those opportunities that were on the cusp and simply needed some more concentrated investment to make those innovations become reality. And we looked at opportunities to make sure that we were not leaving any opportunity to grow jobs on the table. we are off the table. We wanted them on the table. We wanted to improve public health, keep our communities safe, and of course, advance the challenge of environmental justice each step of the way. So with that in mind, we worked with all kinds of communities to do listening sessions so that we could put out an NDC that was credible, that was challenging, that was ambitious, and also that would provide us multiple pathways to get where we needed to go. So look, I'm excited about this, but I know now is the starting gate for us to run as fast as we can. We need to keep investing in creating jobs and tackling climate and ensuring the public that this goes hand in hand. So we're not asking for sacrifice. We have to ask for how we build a future that delivers what people need, not just that delivers what the planet needs. Because we have to invest in the competitiveness of our industries as we employ workers at every level. Look, I am excited, but I'm also re-engaged and I'm re-energized because I know you're going to be standing with us every step of the way. I know that we can create jobs. If you look at the American Jobs Plan, and if we work together to advocate strongly for all of the work we need to get done, we can create jobs for line workers, building thousands of miles of transmission lines for a clean, modern, and resilient grid. What does that get us? That gets us an opportunity to avoid what happened in Texas this year and all those lives lost, and open up opportunities for cost-effective renewable energy that will win every single time, and it will bring clean air to the people that need it the most. It's our workers in energy communities that can cap those abandoned wells and reclaim mines and stop methane leaks all across our country in ways that will not just be good for the planet, but keep our workers that otherwise would be left behind employed and active and putting food on their families' tables. We're talking about auto workers, building modern, efficient electric vehicles, engineers and construction workers, looking at carbon capture and green hydrogen as we look at how we can reinvigorate our steel and cement sectors, and our farmers using cutting edge tools to actually continue to sequester the carbon in the soil. So let's be very clear. This is not going to be easy, but boy, will it be way more fun than the last 4 years. We are going to get this done if we work together. So I expect that that's exactly what we'll do. I'll be so excited as we move forward. And I'm going to take Mike and Antha and everybody that's worked so hard to advance this broad coalition. I'm going to look at how we do cement a partnership together so that it is an effort of one country moving forward, all of us working together. I just think the opportunities ahead are endless, and we should excite people, get them engaged, get them moving forward, because that's what we have to do every day. Every day has to be Earth Day, folks. Every day has to be Jobs Day, and every day has to be for our country and moving us all forward. So thank you for that. And now let me turn it over to Governor Ned Lamont in one of my favorite states in the whole world, the great state of Connecticut. Thanks, Ned, for all of your leadership. Take it away.
Hey, thank you, Gina and Mayor Bloomberg. I think I'm the only non-Red Sox fan in this trio, but we're all in when it comes to the environment, that's for sure. I love that America's all in. I think I speak on behalf of almost every governor in the country. We're really relieved to have a partner in Washington. We could do so much more together. And I think that's true around the world. I think allies in other countries are proud that we're all in this together as well. I just got to say, let's get this infrastructure bill passed. It's through the lens of equity. It's through a lens of the environment. What that means, Gina, like you said about the grid, what that means in terms of wind power and the investments we can make going forward will be transformative. And we don't have that much time. And in the meantime, you know, the governors have been taking the lead and mayors have been taking the lead. You know, Mike Bloomberg was such an incredible leader. He was talking about public health before, while the rest of us were looking it up. And he knew that it was about what we drink, what we eat, and what we breathe. He took the lead in New York City as a mayor, and we're following there as well. And in this last year plus with COVID, we just reminded of what environmental justice means. As we saw COVID coming right down the I-95 corridor, it particularly hit those with asthma, those with obesity issues. That's where we got hit. And when it comes to asthma, that's related to transportation. And these are the places where we've got to do a better job of reducing the pollutants in the air. And that's what the clear guidance from President Biden is all about. I got to tell you, in terms of taking the lead, Gina, you took the lead when you ran the environmental protection here in the state of Connecticut. And you put in place a program called RGGI, which was a market exchange in terms of carbon emissions and the electric grid. And today, Connecticut is, overwhelmingly a zero carbon our electric grid. By 2025, in the next few years, we'll be 90% carbon free in our electric grid. And that's thanks to the type of market mechanisms that you helped institute, which we've got to do on a nationwide basis going forward. Now we have transportation. That's the next great pollutant. That's where most of the pollution is coming from right now. And we got to do a better job. I mean, here in Connecticut, I've been working with the governors of Rhode Island and Massachusetts and the mayor of Washington. We got a program called the Transportation Climate Initiative. And it's following on, what Gina did on the electric grid. We're doing that with transportation and putting a small cost or fee on carbon-related fuels so that we can use those revenues to do a lot of things. One, electric charging stations up and down I-95 and 91 as we move our transportation sector into electrification and what that means going forward. Secondly, we'll have free bus service on weekends. What that means for poor folks who otherwise have to take two buses just to get to the grocery store, and what that means in terms of getting people out of cars and able to get around. Those are the type of things we're able to do by taking the lead at the local level. These are the type of things we're able to do with a really strong partner in President Biden, Kamala Harris, and Gina and the team on this call. And when you say all in, I just want to say as a governor, and you think about how you mobilize support behind what we're trying to do on the environment. I mentioned the urban populations and bracken-bound populations, those particularly hit by COVID. They are on board 100%. They know what environmental justice means. They know what that means for the planet and what that means for their communities. Labor, Gina was talking about, jobs. Labor is putting their shoulder to the wheel. We have just made the biggest commitment to wind power in the history of the state. We've done that in association with fellow governors. That's good construction jobs out there right now. Labor knows what that means. And we're putting a lot of money into energy efficiency, helping those old post-World War II homes that leak like a sieve in terms of efficiency, reduce the price of power, electricity and heating for them, and more importantly, do it without adding to the carbon footprint. The business community is on board. I was I was cheered to see that when General Motors said we're going to have all electric vehicles after 2035, it wasn't like the stockholders ran for the hills. They boosted up the price of General Motors. You know why? Because they knew it was the right thing to do. It was the right thing to do for the environment. It was the right thing to do for their business going forward. And one last group, every time I leave my office, it's young people. It's young people who are standing out there, and they remind the importance of taking care of the environment for them and their children as well. Thanks for what you're doing here today.
All right, thank you so much, Governor Lamont, and all the governors of the United States Climate Alliance, and for your aligned commitment to climate action and for not being a Red Sox fan. And thank you, Mike Bloomberg and Gina McCarthy, for your decades of leadership on climate change. I also want to say thank you to America is All In for hosting this timely event. I'm Alex Steele. I'm the co-anchor of Bloomberg Markets on Bloomberg Television. I'm truly honored to be moderating the next part of today's program. So as we all know, on Thursday at the Leaders Summit on Climate, the Biden-Harris administration announced an ambitious new goal of reducing America's climate pollution by 50 to 52% below 2005 levels by 2030. Today's panelists include representatives from the Biden-Harris administration and Congress, mayors, CEOs, university presidents, and museum directors from all across the country. And they understand that the federal government cannot do this alone and represent a movement of thousands of local leaders committed to ambitious climate action. In fact, recent analysis from America is All In has demonstrated that a comprehensive all-of-society strategy for the United States, integrating federal and non-federal action, can secure the country's path towards a clean and healthy future for all. So, over the next 45 minutes, we're going to examine the benefits of climate action, from jobs and environmental justice to improve public health and increase community resilience. We're going to look closely at the progress we've made and the opportunities to come. I'll also ask the panelists to share some thoughts on how the federal government and non-federal actors can actually work together over the coming weeks, months, and years. I'm really eager to hear from them and not from me, so let's get started. The first panel that we're going to talk about is economic recovery and jobs. Our economy has taken an enormous hit from COVID-19. So in the first conversation, we're going to examine the role that climate action can play in driving our economic recovery and creating jobs. President Biden has said we have an opportunity to create millions of good-paying middle-class union jobs. How do we ensure the clean energy transition brings that significant job growth, especially in the communities that need it most? Well, joining us today are four panelists who hopefully will answer this question for us. Chike Agu, the Department of Labor's Chief Innovation Officer, Mandela Barnes, Lieutenant Governor of Wisconsin, and Steve Fetchhammer, CEO of New Belgium Brewing Company, and Karen Hilgersom, President of Truckee Meadows Community College in Nevada. So let's get right to it. Chike, as a member of the government, when we talk about jobs, what kind of jobs are we talking about? How much do they pay, and where are they going to be?
Sure. And first of all, Alex, thank you so much for moderating this panel, and for America is All In for having this event. And on behalf of the Department of Labor and my secretary, Marty Walsh, we definitely are all in, and we cannot be more excited about this announcement last week from President Biden about this ambitious moonshot to save our climate. And for us at the Department of Labor, we see this as a huge opportunity that in creating the green economy that we need, we can also create the blueprint for the American economy that we want. For us to reach the targets that President Biden is talking about, it's going to require huge investment in infrastructure. So obviously, charging stations, roads, public transit, but we're also going to need to invest in the human infrastructure. The workers specifically who are going to make all of that happen, from the folks who are going to be building that infrastructure to the folks who are going to be working on it, maintaining it over time. And it's why when you look at the American Jobs Plan, the historic $40 billion investment in cutting edge next generation training is what's going to partially make this really, really possible. The question that you asked, Alex, about these being good jobs, absolutely right. If you look at many of the fields that we are talking about, many of them just inherently are, again, because they are on that kind of right side of the curve as far as construction, high technology, things like that. But you also implicitly talk about in your comments that it won't happen on its own. We are going to have to make sure that we explicitly invest in communities, as President Biden has already talked about, using a plurality of green investment to go to communities that have been hardest hit by climate change and will be hardest hit, communities of color, communities of immigrants, our tribal communities, and communities in the inner parts of the country that, frankly, were left behind in the last industrial revolution. How do we make sure that they are not forgotten in the next industrial revolution, which climate change and this effort represents? And so that investment in training is going to be really, really key. And again, we make sure that we're tied directly with industry. We're training for jobs that actually exist, training for jobs that will lead to that, not just good wages, but predictable scheduling, benefits, a pathway to a career. And the last thing that I'll say here is, to your point, you'll hear President Biden talk about a whole of government approach to fighting climate change. We definitely endorse that. I think he would go a step further, and he would say this requires a whole of society approach. Again, the federal government with state and local business and everyone else involved. And so for us to get to those good jobs that we're talking about, it requires investment directly in the American worker, and then direct partnership with all the parties that are represented on this call to make that happen. And so, Alex, I'll throw it to you, to the rest of this illustrious panel.
So let's get to that, because it's easier to provide a tax credit for a rich person to buy a Tesla. It's going to be very different for real job training. And so for that cooperation, Lieutenant Governor, take, because you're really on the front line dealing with that. So how do you create policies that are going to help, your state, your region, and then correct the wrongs of the past because there's been such, environmental injustice. How do you do both at the same time?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Really excited to participate in this conversation, and hope this is music to Chike's ears. We can't be afraid of the word regulation. We can't be afraid of the word mandate either. I mean, I think it's important for us to be intentional about making sure that we reverse the damage of years, decades, and generations past, and have a focus on the most impacted communities. We can't be afraid of that because with all the environmental injustice that's taken place, it's because we haven't been bold enough to say, well, how does this impact community ABC? How does this benefit community XYZ? And you talked about people who were left behind in the Industrial Revolution, and there were also people who were left behind with the New Deal. And I think that as the economy evolved, we made sure as a nation to at least right some of those wrongs. But it sort of happened in a piecemeal way, right? You think about coal miners and black lung, you think about child labor laws, you think about other sorts of things that had not been paid particular attention to, then we realized the devastating impact that it's had. But now that we have this historical context, we can move forward in making sure that we uplift communities, especially the ones who aren't going to get the windfall from those tax breaks that you were talking about, especially the communities that have been on the front lines dealing with the devastating impacts of climate change. And I think about, I talk about this on most panels, after the EPA was created, having the Clean Air Act. And Clean Air Act meant that cars had new emission standards, and vehicles then had to have catalytic converters. And my father assembled catalytic converters for 30 years as his career on the line. And I think it's important to think about that because regulation is not a dirty word. In fact, it's more often than not our roadmap to making sure that environmental justice is established. And part of our plan in the state is creation of an office of environmental justice. And that's not a novel concept in any way. I think we, along with Indiana and possibly Ohio, may be the only Great Lakes states without that office. But again, it comes down to having that very intentional and in many ways surgical approach to reviving the economy.
So that leaves a perfect entryway there to Karin, because basically you have to train workers, right? And if you take a look what happened to coal miners, I mean, part of the opioid crisis is so intense because coal mines just shut and there was no job retraining program that was able to help those workers. How do we avoid that this time? How do we help the workers transition to these quote unquote better paying jobs?
So great question, Alex. And first of all, I want to say that I have had the honor of working at Truckee Meadows Community College, which is serving students and residents in the Reno-Sparks area about 30 minutes from the Gigafactory. And not only—
So you've seen it firsthand, Karin,
Right. Not only can we do it, we have been doing it. And it's so funny. I always hear the university, but the reality is 2-year community colleges have been doing this very skillfully for a very long time. And I've been an educator for over 35 years with community colleges. This is a fantastic American institution. So that's the first thing I need to say. But I want to say that pre-COVID, Truckee Meadows Community College, we were serving about 900 apprentices. These are students who are getting paid to go to class and they're getting paid for on-the-job training, thanks primarily to state grants and grants from the Department of Labor. So it's wonderful to have you here today, Chike. I hope I said that correctly. Half of those apprentices were working for Tesla and Panasonic, pumping out electric cars, right? And batteries that can both store commercial and residential solar and wind power. So the vision is finally real, and Truckee Meadows Community College is all in.
So Karin, real quick, and then Steve, I promise I'll get to you, but Karin, how do you do that? What's the interest been? Do you have to convince people to come in and sort of train for certain types of jobs? What have been some of the hurdles for that?
So the biggest hurdle at the beginning was really figuring out with our corporate partners, namely Tesla and Panasonic, how to create the conditions that we could find and identify the students and the workers who then became apprentices. We ended up with Panasonic actually holding job fairs at a TMCC campus location. Students would walk in be interviewed. If Panasonic liked them, we enrolled them immediately in our training program. So the key here is that community colleges are really ideally ready to connect all the partners, the Department of Labor, to connect hundreds of industry and employers that we already have partnerships with, and of course, to connect with the federal government and have free community colleges, because the other big barrier is always tuition. Startup companies like Tesla at the time, they certainly didn't have the money to provide tuition. Maybe they do now, but a few years ago they didn't, right? This notion of free community colleges is really fantastic, because it really is one of the solutions that could propel us forward so that we can do what is necessary both for social justice, but really environmental justice and a healthy world.
Well, Tesla can sell some Bitcoin. Maybe that can work out, and then they can help with the tuition. Okay, so Steve, you're the CEO, so you're the corporate voice here. You have the first certified carbon neutral beer. And so I wonder if you could help track all of this for us, because you're the guy that's actually putting a lot of money to work. And how do you balance the dirty words like regulation and mandates with profitability, with still like doing the right thing and moving forward? How do you manage all that?
Well, thanks for the question. And let me start by just thanks for having me as a contributor today. Like Gina McCarthy said earlier, and frankly, everyone who's spoken today, I've just been really energized by the news these past few weeks. I've seen the energy on my team who's focused on these issues. I've seen the energy with my partners that we work with in industry and in the public sector. And it's just awesome to see just the change in attitude and the change in commitment in these past couple of weeks. So from our perspective, I think there's a couple of things we need to do. First, just as industry, we do need to applaud the administration's understanding of the crisis at hand and the commitment to the NDC. That's huge news. And as business, we need to be very publicly supportive of that. We also need to set very similar contextually based goals, right? New Belgium's committed to 2030 science-based targets, aim to limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. I'm a big believer you manage what you measure, and therefore adopting goals is really critical to making progress. Things like SBTI and RE100 are all really great places for businesses to start. But then really when, my third point here and really gets to your question is, we need to stop as business talking about there being an economic trade-off between achieving these goals and our overall economic performance. As a CEO, it's not extreme at all for me to say that if we're not able to achieve these targets, I don't have a business left to manage. I don't have a business left to run. And even for those who are a lot more focused in the short term, New Belgium, and frankly, dozens and hundreds of other businesses are already proving that greenhouse gas reductions are not only achievable, they're not only affordable, but they're actually good for our bottom line. And I think that's a really important message. And then finally, we do need to work with policymakers, and that came up earlier on this panel. We can't be afraid of policy. We need sound policy that further incentivizes collective action. A lot of the issues we face in our own footprint as New Belgium, we can't address on our own. And we're going to need good, sound policy that drives collective action to get there. And then lastly, we need to do all of this while we're centering worker rights and economic opportunity for all in everything that we do. This is a historic opportunity to reset the economy, and we can't overlook the fragility of economic systems that have marginalized and discriminated against enormous portions of the population. Diversity, inclusion, wealth equity, those are all really, really good things for my business. They're good for our shared prosperity and resilience as a country, and they're really just good for humanity overall, and we need to be focused on that.
So Steve, one quick thing on that. When you said you do need support and you do need help from the federal government, like, can you give me any specific example of like something that you'd like to see them do that would help you do your job or help guide you to do it?
So for us, we've got really 4 large sources of greenhouse gas emissions. It's around container manufacturing. So think of cans and bottles that hold beer, barley farming, distribution, logistics, and refrigerants. And in each of those areas, there's really sound policy that could help us reduce our overall footprint as a company. If you just say, take container manufacturing, right? That's really about greening our electric grid, incentivizing renewable energy installations, really helping those companies that produce those products for us also get to a greener footprint themselves. But there's going to be some incentives that we need to make that happen and to really accelerate that transition.
Well, to that point, Chike, is it the carrot or the stick? There has to be some kind of combination of that. Have you guys been able to figure out what combination works best?
I mean, this is a combination that's going to evolve over the next years and decades. Again, this is a one chance, a one-sided moonshot, and the other chance, kind of a long-run marathon. And honestly, that combination is going to shift over time. And it's going to be in shift in combination with folks represented on this call, training, state government, businesses to help make that happen. I think we are going to set some really clear standards and mandates, but also there's going to be support from the federal government all the way on down to make sure that folks can meet those mandates. And again, that's going to evolve over time, and it's going to involve being in conversation with everyone here. But I think you heard President Biden say this: so the only thing that is not an option is inaction. And so in terms of acting, we're going to shift and evolve along the way, the same way we did during the Industrial Revolution, the same way we did during the New Deal. And we're going to end in an economy that makes us not only prosperous, but that also makes us proud, and also it's one that we can leave to our children. So I think the answer is stay tuned. And Alex, I throw it back to you.
Yeah, my daughter won't even let me have the water running for more than a second now. She yells at me for wasting water. She's 6.5. So last question for Lieutenant Governor. It's the same question. It's like, how do you deal with the carrot and the stick combination?
So I think that with the carrot and stick conversation, I think you just got to start somewhere. I mean, that's what it's always been. While we didn't have a federal government that was willing to act in partnership, states had to sort of go it alone. And it was the same way, like coming from a state that didn't take this seriously for a long time. It was local government that ran the operation. It was local government that set the standards. And also large and small businesses that set their own goals, and they led the way. In many instances, we found ourselves chasing the business community. So having that example at least helped us out, and it helped us make the case to the public as well.
Look, I hate to wrap. I would love to talk to you guys for the next 20 minutes, but we are out of time. But I do appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today. There's much more to get into, but thank you so very much. I truly, truly appreciate it. Before we move on to our next conversation, I do want to introduce Representative Kathy Castor of Florida. Representative Castor chairs the House Select Committee on the Climate Crisis, and she has an important message to share.
Well, thank you, Alex. On behalf of my colleagues in the most diverse Congress in the history of America, I'm thrilled to be here to say that we also are all in when it comes to clean energy and climate action now. Thanks to all of you and President Biden, we have a historic opportunity to make America healthier, make America more resilient, and to advance environmental justice. As President Biden said, it's also an opportunity to create millions of good-paying union jobs across every zip code. We can grow our economy and boost America's competitiveness through job-creating investments in clean energy and resilience. That means putting folks to work in a bunch of different industries, whether it's expanding and strengthening the electric grid, or weatherizing homes and businesses, or plugging abandoned oil wells and coal mines. These are American jobs that cannot be exported. And as we expand clean energy, we can also boost our manufacturing industry and ensure the technologies of tomorrow are made here in America. That means building electric vehicles and electrifying our school buses and postal trucks. It means constructing a broad network of charging stations all across the nation. And the good news is that Congress has a plan to do this, to create jobs and solve the climate crisis. When Speaker Pelosi created our Select Committee on the Climate Crisis last Congress, she tasked us with creating a framework to get to net zero as soon as possible. We couldn't have done it without you. You have all advanced these solutions in your communities, and now Congress must build upon them with robust legislative action through the American Jobs Plan and beyond. That's why last summer, when we released our Climate Crisis Action Plan, we put forth hundreds of policies Congress can enact to get to net zero as soon as possible. And we've made good on our promises. Out of the 700 recommendations in our report, we've already passed 250 in the House and turned nearly 100 into law. And that's saying something in a very divided Congress. But we're ready to keep working. Thanks to all of you, we will turn these recommendations into policy and law. We have a partner now in the White House and across the Biden administration. So I want to end by saying thank you for your commitment to climate solutions, especially during the last 4 years of the previous administration. Your leadership laid the groundwork for why we're here today and what is possible. Now with an ambitious new target and with the help of a re-engaged administration, we can deliver transformational benefits to communities all across America. America is all in, and we're ready to deliver. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, Representative Castor. Really appreciate that. Our next panel is about what the public policy landscape is. So climate change is already leading to more frequent droughts, floods, fires, and those extreme weather events can demolish houses, destroy power lines, and damage water infrastructure. And while their impact is immediate, it can also linger for generations as well, stunting economic growth and exacerbating public health concerns. At the same time, an investment in infrastructure can increase our preparedness and address local injustices. Just look at what could have happened with Hurricane Katrina if we had rebuilt better. Joining us now to discuss how we mitigate those risks, strengthen public health, and build long-term resilience within our communities are Brenda Mallory, Chair of the White House Council on Environmental Quality, Sylvester Turner, the Mayor of Houston, Texas, Lloyd Dean, the CEO of Common Spirit Health and co-chair of America is All In, and Alejandra Peña Gutierrez, director of the Museo de Arte de Ponce in Puerto Rico. Lots to get through here. I'd love to start with you, Brenda. We can't ignore that the 4 years happened, the previous 4 years, and there are still going to be climate disbelievers out there. So how does the government help communities get some resilience to climate change when they're also fighting public perception that can be pretty volatile?
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Alex, and thanks for that introduction. I think that there is some disbelief, but there's also tremendous excitement, as we've just heard over the course of this program. There is a lot of positive energy, and it's expanding in ways that I think really is having some really positive benefits in communities. And I will just say that I think in terms of the resilience work, if you look at and study both the executive orders that the president issued on climate change, the 14008 in particular on tackling climate change, as well as the American Jobs Bill, there are activities spread throughout the federal government that are focusing on how we can help communities and help people understand both the importance and the opportunities in addressing resilience that are before us. I think there are basically 4 themes that I just want to hit today very quickly that are important in what we can do in the resilience space. First is recognizing that the decisions must be grounded in science. Science-based analysis and information is going to be critical. And being able to explain that in ways that help communities and help people who are not so sure understand it is also going to be an important part of it. Having validators within those communities who can convey that message, I think, will be very important. But in the executive order, the key science agencies have been called on to both expand our capacity for understanding and forecasting climate activities, the forecast capabilities, but also to have the ability for the public to have access to information that is related to climate information. And I think that's going to be very important in our efforts. Second, we will meet the resilience challenge through a whole of government approach. Gina McCarthy already referred to that. My friend on the last panel also made reference to that. And what that means is that every agency has different opportunities and different ways in which they're able to connect with communities and connect with folks about how their programs will benefit people. And in my office, where the Office of Federal Sustainability sits, that allows us to look at our own behavior. The federal government is not only looking at what it can do in the space of resilience, but it is having a powerful ability to kind of serve as a market force that will help others to actually recognize that there are opportunities here that we can take advantage of, and through that advance the efforts in resilience. And then, of course, we're going to have a return to the resilience and adaptation plans, which are really important not only for identifying what the opportunities are, but also for tracking what our successes in those areas and driving ambition. So that's going to be hugely important. And then working with the climate office here at CEQ, we've historically played a number of roles, both in connecting people, stakeholders, communities, in ways that have been, I think, very important in driving activities in the federal government. We can use that as a way to leverage federal resources to make sure that there's sort of a unified federal resilience approach. We can use it to convene diverse stakeholders to develop and share best practices. There's a lot of great work going on. You all know that, you all are doing it. And being able to kind of lift that up and allow for folks to learn from one another is a really important effort that I think the federal government can bring to this. Fast tracking our ability to kind of solve the sticky points in policy development and how we move forward is a role that we can play just in identifying how we reduce some of the barriers that exist. And then, activating kind of the full resiliency potential that exists in the work that America is All In has been doing with all the various stakeholders in that, working with the federal government, I think is going to be an important element. The third thing, which I'll just mention briefly, is nature-based approaches. The executive orders identifies our ability to increase resiliency by, calling on a need to protect and to take action to protect and restore our coastal ecosystems. That's hugely important in the work that is going to be necessary over the coming years, and then also taking advantage of our kind of 30 by 30 initiative, which really looks to elevate the importance of a landscape protection as a way to assist in climate change. And then finally, everyone's mentioned it and is critically important, is just like the focus on vulnerable communities and recognizing that low income and communities of color are often the first impacted by our sort of extreme weathers and other activities that are caused by climate change, and sort of the least capable of weathering some of the problems that come from that. So these are all the ways in which I think that we're going to be bringing a kind of all government approach to looking at these issues. And I will stop there. Thank you.
So you're busy is what I'm guessing. There's a lot. So let's try and unpack a little bit from sort of the health perspective and then on the local government perspective. Mayor Turner, the Texas freeze was a complete disaster, and I covered it from a financial perspective, and the conversation that percolated just days after was still that wind and solar and alternative energy caused the problem. So I'm just wondering, like, how you fix communities and help them be more resilient when a lot of communities are still resistant to the underlying causes of what's happening.
But I think Alex, thanks for having me, and it's good to be with everyone. Let me just say that I think people are recognizing that these storms are coming with greater frequency and greater intensity. Just for example, Houston, in the last 5 years, we have faced 4 500-year storms, not counting what happened in February. And what happened in February, over 100 people lost their lives. It was a predictable sort of event. We faced the same thing in 2011. But for 10 years, our policymakers, those with the Public Utilities Commission, those with ERCOT, never mentioned climate change. And if you don't mention climate change, if you don't talk about it, you don't factor that into your strategies, into your plans, you don't take the necessary steps to build resilience. In fact, it was a market-driven system where they put profits above resilience. And as a consequence, over 100 people lost their lives. People died from carbon monoxide poisoning, died from extreme cold hypothermia. Billions of dollars were lost. In many cases, this storm was more detrimental than Hurricane Harvey back in 2017. So I think there was a huge outcry. People are angry, mad, frustrated, and rightfully so. And hopefully that will force a change because it's happening in real time and is coming with greater frequency and intensity.
So on that point, Mayor, is there something that you would like to implement that you wouldn't have been able to implement a year ago, or something that would really help communities gear up for the next weather impact?
You have to build resiliency in your system. Quite frankly, 10 years ago, the grid from the wellhead to the grid itself should have been weatherized. It was not. That did not take place. There has to be resiliency, redundancy built into the system. So, for example, regardless of what the state elects to do, here in Houston, I'm putting in additional backup redundancy, building resiliency, and not just at the city facilities. We have to make sure that we eliminate or reduce this energy poverty that exists even in our low-income communities in these neighborhoods. So we have to build resiliency there. We have to have backup plans. We are turning now. I put in place in February of last year our Resilient Houston strategy, 18 goals, 62 strategy items. We are 92% moving forward on all of those a year later. Back on Earth Day, put in place the first effective climate action plan, four pillars, energy transition. This is the energy capital of the world, but we need to lead on energy transition, transportation, electrifying our vehicles by 2030, 2035, building optimization, and material waste management. So if we move forward on all four of those pillars, locally, we are building resiliency, emphasis on equity, but at the same time, we need the state to move forward and do the things that will also establish resiliency for our statewide power grid. Otherwise, it affects not only your power, but it affects your water systems as well.
So you're busy too. Okay, definitely on that. So it's a similar question, Alejandra, to you as well, because Puerto Rico has also been at the forefront of many climate weather events like Hurricane Maria, for example, and you're still rebuilding after that. What has been instrumental? Like, what have you used in a community sense that has helped sort of spread knowledge and deal with resilience going forward?
Well, thank you very much for having me here. First of all, I really think that climate change is undeniably a cultural phenomenon too. And yet for years, cultural institutions have been left behind the climate change dialogue and course of action, when it is clear that we could play a significant role in the implementation of a culture shift to address it. Museums need to be valued by their governments and also the industry, not only for their works and objects. We're economic engines and inclusive community anchors built for everyone. We partner with schools and have become true educational assets, not to mention we're one of the most trustworthy sources of information in our society. You mentioned Hurricane Maria, and I think that especially in times of crisis, cultural institutions give society a sense of purpose. They hold us together and help us adapt. The Museo de Arte de Ponce managed to reopen its doors 1 week after the hit of Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico to become a place of solace and a realm of hope for its community. However, natural disasters such as hurricanes could be seen not only as a threat, but also as an opportunity. In our case, the recent 6.4 magnitude earthquake that seriously damaged our main building will hopefully allow us to rebuild in a more conscious and efficient way, but we can't do it alone. Museums have their tasks to fill. We need to protect our collections from the imminent impact of climate change, but we also need to put in place best practices to lower our carbon footprint. And with the help of the federal government, we can take positive action for the well-being of our planet. Museums should be partnered with. We play a significant role in what catches the public eye. We're also trusted environments that can facilitate dialogue about many issues. Let climate change be one of them. An efficient way to deal with climate crisis is through the involvement of our communities, and museum can become instrumental in the promotion and implementation of climate action. Echoing Gina McCarty's words, we can excite people and get them engaged. And the deeper embedded the need for changes in our culture, the greater chance our initiatives will have to succeed and thrive, even in the event of a political or policy shift. Thank you.
So let's get to the health part of it, because everyone sort of alluded to it and talked about it. So, Mr. Dean, Lloyd, you lead the largest Catholic health system and one of the overall largest hospital chains in the country. So can you talk a little bit about what you've seen over the years in terms of health implications due to climate change, whether it's a flood that doesn't get repaired and ruins the water system or pollution in the air? Like, what are the common things that we see? And I want to get to the point, like, if we fix X, how does that help our health on an X and Y level?
First of all, thank you for the question. It's an honor to be here with my fellow panel members. Those of us that are in the health and healthcare sector see every day, and we see the evidence that the climate crisis that we are facing has a direct impact on our patients, our people in the communities we serve, and in particular, a disproportionate impact on the poor and the most vulnerable. And at its core, climate change is, I submit, a health equity issue. From access to clean air and safe drinking water to the effects that have been mentioned of the extreme weather that has been manifesting itself throughout the world. These conditions, we know, contribute to a long list of health-related issues, from trauma and emergencies to mental health, allergies, respiratory illness, and infectious diseases. The U.S. health system itself contributes 10% of the nation's carbon emissions and 9% of the harmful non-greenhouse air pollutants. And we can, must, and will do better. I'm proud to say that as one of the major systems in this country, that health systems are stepping up to be a part of the solution. We are promoting sustainable, resilient, and climate smart healthcare across this country. And we believe that unequivocally, there is an unbreakable connection between the health of our planet and the health of its people. Our collective actions to meet and to exceed the climate goals that the Biden-Harris administration and others have set will play a critical role in addressing the underlying causes, we believe, of health inequities and creating, therefore, a healthier community for all.
So on that point, what is like the low-hanging fruit for a public-private partnership from where you sit, Lloyd?
I think there are tremendous opportunities that, given that the healthcare infrastructure is one of the vital components of a community, but we can't do it all ourselves. I think that for companies and for both public and not-for-profit companies to come together to work with the health infrastructure and to take those things that other panel members have said to form a partnership, specifically measurable kinds of programs to begin to attack some of the elements that are embedded within what we talk about as this climate change journey. We can and our position to make a significant difference. And there are many, many specific best practices and things that we know that work, that in unison between the health sector and between companies and organizations, that we can begin to attack this very, very important activity that if we don't, I think jeopardizes the future of our planet.
Sadly, we also have to leave it there. I could also talk to this panel for 20 minutes more, but thank you so much, all of you, for your time and commitment. Really, truly appreciate it. It's such an important conversation. Thank you for all of your time. Now, we do want to get some closing remarks as well. I'd like to introduce Vi Lyles, Mayor of Charlotte and co-chair of America is All In.
Thank you for this wonderful conversation. Everyone has contributed so very much. But I want to talk a little bit about our city. In Charlotte, our city council unanimously adopted our strategic energy action plan at the end of 2018 stating our goals for sourcing all energy for all our municipal buildings and fleet from zero carbon sources by 2030. And by 2050, we are striving to become a low carbon city by keeping in line with the Paris Climate Agreement. As a city, we continue to implement meaningful, actionable sustainability goals around what we need as a growing city, especially in the areas of transportation and mobility. Just last night, our City Council approved a pilot program and public-private partnership between the Charlotte Area Transit System and E-Trans Energy, a subsidiary affiliate of Duke Energy. To test this program will test the performance of battery electric bus vehicles across the greater metropolitan Charlotte area. This collaboration, which has been supported by the Bloomberg Philanthropies American Cities Climate Challenge, will kick off a 12 to 18-month pilot program to test 18 new buses from 3 different manufacturers. E-Trans Energy will support the bus system with workforce training, performance data, procurement, electrical service management, and installation of battery charging infrastructure at our bus facilities. The pilot will allow our bus system to collect data and assess vehicle performance while operating across our transit system in preparation for the future. Our bus system, CATS, is expected to receive the battery electric vehicles by the end of 2021. Operation of this pilot program is anticipated to begin in early 2022. Together, in partnership, the city and E-Trans Energy submitted a grant application to the Federal Transit Administration and was awarded $3.7 million for a low or no emissions grant award, which will fund 6 of the 18 buses. The other 12 buses, the city is going to pay for. This initiative goes hand in hand with our work with Charlotte Moves Mobility Task Force. We're creating a transformational mobility program for our community. And so I am proud of our commitment as a city, as we make sure we are all in with America. It is now my pleasure to introduce my fellow co-chair of America is All In, an exemplary leader on climate, Washington Governor Jay Inslee. Governor?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I'm looking forward to your electric bus success. I know it's going to work for you. It's working for us big time. So thanks for your leadership. Listen, I want to just say I love everybody on this call because you're all working for my grandchildren. I got 4 of the most beautiful grandchildren in America, and everybody on this call is giving them a shot at a healthy future. We know we're on the edge of the abyss when it comes to climate change, but we also know that this is a moment of a quantum shift in the ability to move forward. This could be a giant leap for mankind and womankind, and we're going to make it together. And I'm very excited to now be part of this effort. I want to thank Mayor Bloomberg for putting his golf career on hold while he fights climate change. And I appreciate his efforts in this regard. I have 3 quick points to make. Number 1, I love the fact that the word all is in the title of this organization, because we know that the quantum leap that we need to make does require all parts of our blessed community to be involved, not just the federal government. Mayors, governors, county council people, city council people, CEOs, assistant CEOs, labor leaders. To get this done, all of us have to be involved. And so I really appreciate that we've started with that basic presumption of how we are going to succeed. Second point, the governors are all in. We have 25 states in the U.S. Climate Alliance. I started with Jerry Brown and Governor Cuomo a few years ago. We now have 25 states that all have embraced and looking forward to the same success of the national goal as far as reduction of carbon. So we have some really strong organs of moving the ball here in addition to the federal government. And we should just be thrilled that we have a federal government that now is fully engaged in this effort. I can't tell, I've been in this climate warrior for about 2 decades now. And this is the most exciting moment of that effort, to have a president who has an all of government approach, but we cannot rely on that. The federal government's going to do fantastic work on this. but it cannot succeed without the rest of our community succeeding. So we intend to be there every step of the way as partners with our federal government. But that leads to my third point. We can do things that even the federal government cannot do. We can be out in front. My legislature 2 days ago passed what will be the second Cap and Invest program to actually cap carbon in our state, and also a clean fuel standard that when they are implemented will have the strongest environmental justice provisions of any law in the United States. These are things that at the moment the federal government can't do. So I believe we all got to be not just partners with the administration, we got to be pulling, because we got to show the next horizon, the next step in this bold adventure. So I'm very excited about what we're doing. I look forward to all of us working to see how we can be vocal in Glasgow. I'm going to be talking to you about that. You know, some people think it's the subnationals. I think we governors and mayors are supernationals, and we need to lead the way. So as we say in Washington, early to bed, early to rise, work like hell and organize. Let's make sure our senators do their job. We'll do ours. Congratulations.
All right, thanks so much, Governor. I appreciate that, Governor Inslee. Thank you for being a tireless champion of climate action. And thanks to everyone, to America is All In for convening these critical conversations. World Wildlife Fund, RMI, Climate Nexus, and many others in supporting this work. And thank you all for joining us. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.